Welcome to Biomed Explorer. In this video, I'd like to talk about the human reproductive system, both the male and female versions. In this video, I'll discuss what these systems actually are, how each one is built and organized, the journey a single reproductive cell takes on each side, how the two systems come together to create new life, and the hidden hormonal conversation running the entire process behind the scenes. So, let's get started. What is the reproductive system? Most people know the basics. Men produce sperm, women produce eggs, and somewhere along the way, a baby can result. But very few people actually understand just how much coordinated architecture, timing, and hormonal signaling it takes to make that simple explanation possible. So, what exactly is it? The reproductive system is the collection of organs responsible for producing, maturing, and combining the specialized cells needed to create a new human being. Unlike most of your other organ systems, which run constantly from birth to death, this one switches on at puberty and largely follows its own internal calendar from that point forward. Though male and female versions look and function very differently on the surface, both are built around the same underlying goal, producing a reproductive cell, known as a gamete, and creating the conditions needed for those two gametes to eventually meet. Puberty, when the system switches on. Before either system becomes functional, it spends years sitting essentially dormant. Both males and females are born with all the basic structures already in place, but those structures stay quiet until a specific signal from the brain flips the switch, usually sometime between the ages of 8 and 14. That signal triggers a surge of hormones that cause the reproductive organs to mature rapidly over the following few years. In males, testosterone levels climb sharply, kickstarting sperm production for essentially the first time and driving the physical changes typically associated with male puberty, a deepening voice, increased muscle mass, and body hair growth. In females, rising estrogen levels trigger the start of ovulation and the menstrual cycle, along with breast development and other physical changes. From this point forward, both systems remain active for decades, though on very different timelines, the male system continuing largely uninterrupted for most of adulthood, while the female system eventually winds down at menopause, typically sometime in a woman's late 40s or early 50s, when the ovaries' supply of egg cells has been depleted and monthly cycles stop altogether. The male reproductive system, built for production and delivery. Let's start with the male system, since its structure is fairly straightforward to follow from start to finish. Most of it sits outside the main body cavity, and there's a very specific reason for that. At the center of the system are the testes, a pair of oval organs housed inside the scrotum, a loose pouch of skin hanging just behind the penis. The testes have two jobs running simultaneously. First, they manufacture sperm cells through an ongoing process called spermatogenesis, which continues virtually nonstop throughout a man's reproductive life. Second, they produce testosterone, the primary male hormone responsible for muscle development, body hair, a deepening voice, and sex drive. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. Sperm production works best a few degrees cooler than normal body temperature, which is exactly why the testes hang outside the main body cavity instead of staying tucked safely inside like most other organs. The scrotum even has its own built-in climate control, with small muscles that pull the testes closer to the body for warmth or let them hang farther away to cool down, constantly fine-tuning the temperature like a thermostat that's always making tiny adjustments. Once sperm cells are produced, they aren't ready for action yet. They travel into a tightly coiled tube called the epididymis, sitting just behind each testicle, where they spend roughly 2 weeks maturing and gaining the ability to swim. From there, during arousal, muscle contractions push the sperm into a longer tube called the vas deferens, which carries them up and out of the scrotum into the pelvis. Along this final stretch, the sperm pick up passengers. Glands called the seminal vesicles, and the prostate add a nutrient-rich fluid that feeds and protects the sperm, together forming what's known as semen. Think of it like a delivery truck loading up fuel and supplies right before a long haul. This entire mixture then travels through the urethra, the same tube used for urination, though a valve. Mechanism during arousal ensures only one or the other passes through at a time and exits through the penis during ejaculation. The female reproductive system, built for cycles and support. Now let's shift over to the female system, which works on a completely different rhythm, one built around monthly cycles rather than constant, nonstop production. At the core of the system sit the ovaries, two small almond-shaped glands positioned on either side of the uterus. Unlike the testes, which manufacture new sperm continuously, the ovaries are working with a fixed supply they were essentially born with. A newborn female's ovaries already contain hundreds of thousands of immature egg cells, and from puberty onward, a small batch of these begins developing every single cycle, though typically only one fully matures and gets released. That release is called ovulation, and it happens roughly once a month, usually somewhere around the midpoint of the menstrual cycle. Once released, the egg is swept up by finger-like projections called fimbriae into the fallopian tube, a narrow passageway connecting each ovary to the uterus. This is where fertilization actually takes place, if it's going to happen at all. The fallopian tube acts almost like a conveyor belt, using tiny hair-like structures lining its walls to gently guide the egg toward the uterus over the following several days. The uterus itself is a hollow, muscular, pear-shaped organ, and every single cycle, regardless of whether fertilization occurs, its inner lining, called the endometrium, thickens in preparation, building up a nutrient-rich cushion just in case a fertilized egg arrives and needs somewhere to implant. If no fertilization occurs, that lining has no job left to do, so the body sheds it, which is what shows up as a menstrual period, and the entire cycle begins building back up again from scratch. At the base of the uterus sits the cervix, a narrow passage connecting the uterus to the vagina, acting almost like a gatekeeper. It's the anatomical path sperm travel upward through, and later, if pregnancy occurs, it's also the same channel that gradually opens to allow a baby to be born. Where the two systems meet. Here's the moment where these two completely separate systems, running on completely separate timelines, actually intersect. During conception, sperm delivered into the female reproductive tract begin an intense race upward, through the cervix, through the uterus, and into the fallopian tubes, chasing down a single released egg. Out of the tens of millions of sperm involved in a single ejaculation, only a tiny handful ever make it anywhere close to the egg, and typically just one succeeds in penetrating it. The egg itself isn't a passive target waiting around either. Chemical signals it releases help guide sperm in the right direction, almost like a homing beacon switched on for only a brief window each cycle. The instant fertilization happens, the egg immediately changes its outer surface to block any other sperm from getting in, a kind of chemical door slam that happens in a fraction of a second, ensuring the resulting cell ends up with exactly the right combination of genetic material and nothing more. The genetic material from both cells then combines, creating a single new cell called a zygote, carrying a full, unique set of chromosomes, half from each parent. That zygote begins dividing almost immediately as it continues its journey down the fallopian tube toward the uterus, a trip that typically takes several days, where, if all goes well, it implants into that thickened lining and pregnancy officially begins. The hidden coordination, hormones running the whole show. You might be wondering how two systems that look and behave so differently manage to stay synchronized enough for any of this to actually work. The answer, in both men and women, comes down to a tightly coordinated hormonal command chain, running from the brain down to the reproductive organs themselves. A small structure at the base of the brain releases a hormone that signals the pituitary gland, a pea-sized gland just beneath it, to release two more hormones, follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. In men, these two hormones travel through the bloodstream to the testes, keeping sperm production running and testosterone levels steady. In women, those same two hormones instead drive the entire monthly cycle, triggering an egg to mature, prompting ovulation, and later signaling the ovaries to release the hormones that thicken the uterine lining. It's essentially the same messaging system used for two very different purposes, one running on a constant loop, the other on a repeating monthly countdown, both controlled by the exact same command center in the brain. the three main jobs of the reproductive system. So now that we've covered both systems, let's bring it together. Across both the male and female versions, the reproductive system performs three main jobs. The first job is gamete production. Whether that's the constant manufacturing of new sperm in the testes or the monthly maturing and release of a single egg from the ovaries, this is the raw material the entire system exists to create. The second job is transport and timing. Reproductive cells on both sides need to travel, sperm through a series of ducts and eventually into the female tract, and the egg through the fallopian tube, all coordinated by hormonal timing so that both cells have a realistic chance of meeting. The third job is supporting new life should fertilization succeed. This falls largely on the female system, which builds and maintains the uterine lining every cycle specifically in case it's needed, and later expands dramatically to support a developing pregnancy for approximately 40 weeks. It's worth briefly mentioning how important it is to keep the system healthy, since reproductive health issues remain common and often go undiscussed. Conditions like endometriosis, where uterine lining-like tissue grows outside the uterus and causes pain, polycystic ovary syndrome, which can disrupt regular ovulation, and low testosterone or reduced sperm quality, which can affect male fertility, all stem from disruptions somewhere along these carefully timed systems. This is part of why doctors so often emphasize regular checkups and paying attention to unusual changes, because much of long-term reproductive health depends on catching these disruptions early, often long before they become serious. Wrapping it up, there you have it. The male and female reproductive systems, two structurally different machines built around the same fundamental goal, producing specialized cells and creating the conditions for new life to begin. The male system manufactures and delivers sperm on a continuous basis, while the female system matures and releases a single egg on a repeating monthly rhythm, both of them ultimately steered by the exact same hormonal command chain running quietly in the background from the brain down. The testes, ovaries, and the entire network of ducts, tubes, and glands supporting them all work together as part of this system to make human reproduction possible, from the moment puberty switches everything on to the moment, decades later, that the female system eventually winds back down. The reproductive system may be something you rarely think about outside of biology class, but for nearly the entire span of human history, it's the reason any of us are here to think about anything at all. Thanks for watching, and Biomed Explorer uploads a new science video every week. Please subscribe and share.